Hello my friends and welcome back. Thank you very much for being with me again today. About 3 topics for this video. You can say 4, but hey, the first one. Russia designate the leaders, the guys in charge of Ukraine as terrorists, a terrorist organization. So the Kiev regime is not only illegitimate, but according to the Russians, it crossed the threshold into a terrorist organization. First topic. Second topic, Putin tells Trump that Russia will retaliate and respond to the attacks on the airplanes and airfields, 5 airfields. Now, Russia did not designate the leadership in Kiev as terrorists for the attacks on the airfields. They designate the Kiev regime as terrorist for the destroying of the bridges in Kursk and Bryansk. So I will go into that as well. So make the distinction. They consider the attack on the military bases as a military operation. But the other one is attack on civilians, blowing up bridges where you are going to have civilian trains derail and people die. They consider that as terrorism. The Ukrainians confirm. The Ukrainians. I will have to make the distinction from the get-go. That's one thing, Ukrainian nation, and the other thing is the guys in charge of the Ukrainian nation who are not really Ukrainians. So when Putin refers to as the terrorist regime, he's referring to the guys on top. Unfortunately, the vast majority of the Ukrainians were babooned into voting for these aliens. So Putin has, we will retaliate for the military attack, if you want to call it, on the 5 bases, but those guys are terrorists. Therefore, they're going to attack however they feel fit. We have Peskov, who will tell us how Russia and when Russia will retaliate for those attacks of a now designated terrorist organization in charge of a country. From illegitimate, as I said, turning to terrorist. I'm going to show you about 8, 9 articles coming from various sources, and the Ukrainian confirmation that they will continue the terror. And the last topic for this video is United States of America issues security alert for Kiev. So the Russians might use something that they did not want to use, but some other country used twice. I hope it doesn't happen. So let's start with the first topic. Russia Today. Foreign-made explosives used in railway terrorist attacks. Russian prosecutors. So that is the first one. Ukrainian intelligence planned the explosions which led to the death of 7 civilians, the chair of Russia's investigative committee has said. I made a video on this when it happened, and the media continued to call those attacks as accidents. All right? So not only accidents, but they said those were not civilian trains. They were military trains. They were freight trains. Regardless, there were not military personnel involved in that or weapons. Nobody talks about it. So, do you think that fits as a terrorist attack? Now, if you say no, then I would like to remind you that bad dude who threw those cocktail Molotov into the gathering of those people in the United States of America, one person throwing those was called a terrorist act. Blowing up 2 bridges where you have train derailed, how do you call that? Military operation? All right. The definition of terrorism is clear. Changing the policies, the direction of a entity by using terror. That is, usually in an aggressive and obviously this kind of form. So I don't know how you can go around. You can say, well, we can talk about the Russians too. Yeah, we can talk about the Russians too. Not in this video. So let's see what else we have here. Second article. Putin accuses Ukraine of terrorism following fatal train accidents. You see these accidents? So this is from DPA International. This is not Sputnik. This is not the Russians. So this is from the Western world. They call those things accidents. So if I blow up, let's say, a bridge where a train goes over in the near future, don't I expect that to happen? Don't you think that was the whole goal? Or do you think they want to destroy that, so they just prevent the Russians to conduct some transports for the next, I don't know, 3 days? So that was an accident, according to DPA International. It makes you know, I don't know, you know what I mean? Next, Russia Today. Illegitimate Kiev regime turning into terrorist organization, Putin said. So from illegitimate, now it turned into a terrorist organization. The latest terrorist acts carried out by Ukraine in Russia are the outcome of decisions made by political leadership, the president has said. Facing heavy battlefield losses, the quote-unquote illegitimate Kiev regime has resorted to organizing terrorist attacks to try to intimidate Russia, Putin said. The recent acts of railway sabotage in Russia's Bryansk and Kursk regions were undoubtedly a terrorist act, end quote, Putin said. He added that, and I'm quoting, the decisions to carry out such crimes were, of course, made in Ukraine by the political leadership, and I'm quoting. The strike on the civilian population was intentional, end quote, Putin said, and I'm quoting again, and this only confirms our concern that the already illegitimate regime in Kiev, which once seized power, is gradually turning into a terrorist organization, and its sponsors are becoming accomplices to terrorists. That is the United States of America, Great Britain, France, Germany, and so on. So they said Kursk and Bryansk. Let's see where Kursk and Bryansk are. So this is the map of Ukraine. Kursk is right here, right, and Bryansk is right in the north, right here. So these are where the accidents occurred, but it was another one by Melitopol, but they don't mention that one right here. I don't understand why that's not mentioned. Right there across from the Sea of Azov. Why is that not mentioned? It was another train that was blown up, or the bridge. So here it is, these two. So let's move on. These are a number of, I don't want to go and read them one by one. I'm just going to read the headlines coming from Sputnik. Kremlin confirms Putin told Trump that Russia will retaliate to Ukraine's attacks on Airfield. 5 explosive devices were used in terrorist attacks on bridge in Kursk. This subject I will discuss immediately after I'm finishing this one. 5 explosive devices were used in terrorist attacks. Scott Ritter, Trump needs to decide whether he supports Russia or terrorism. I don't think Russia is innocent either, so I would, be a little bit more, because Russia accidentally or intentionally hit civilian areas. I don't know if it's intentionally or not. Those things were clearly intentional to blow up those things, but they can claim it was war and we just want to disrupt the line of contact, another contact, the supply lines. Could claim, but hey, and then what do you say? Collateral damage? All right. Ukraine rail and bridge attack, literally the textbook definition of terrorism, anal list. Putin calls tragedy in Bryansk region targeted attack on civilians terrorism. Terrorist attack in Kursk, Bryansk region organized by Ukrainian Special Service. All right, you got here, cause blast, pop. So that's the thing, right? Next one. This is the confirmation from Ukrinform. This is the foreign minister of Ukraine. He's one of the guys that Putin calls in illegitimate government right now. Sybiha, Russia must face real strength or terror will continue. I mean, this is Ukrinform, this is Ukrainian media outlet. This is not, I don't know, Sputnik or Russia Today or RIA Novosti or something. This is the Ukrainian, and he used this word right here, clearly. Clearly, my friends. So, what do you think? Now, if you want to really, how should I put it, figure out, predict Russia's response, you think of what the Americans do to terrorists, the ones that they designate as. They use drones to take them out, wherever they are. So remember, if you don't, I will remind you, CIA used one drone that I'm aware of to kill a terrorist guy in another country called Afghanistan. From Pakistan, where CIA has bases, used a drone, crossed the border, went into the Afghanistan, another country's air, okay, and went and destroyed these terrorists that we designated as terrorists. So if those guys are terrorists, that means the Russians, using the best technique, they can send some missiles and take out, let's say, Zelensky when he attends some summit, I don't know, in Brussels, like right now, NATO, or wherever he might be. He's not over there right now. But let's say he's visiting London, to make it better, Zelensky. So the Russians should copy the United States? I think so. Why? The United States is good. And their methods of eliminating terror is like that. So the Russians could do that, don't you think? Well, that's one thing. In a video I made, I think yesterday or the day before, I stated that maybe the Russians will start, because it was a question, I was like, why don't, it was not a suggestion, do it. It was just an intellectual, philosophical question, rhetorical question. Why don't the Russians hit the governmental buildings in Kiev? I don't know, the presidential palace, office, however, building in Kiev, and, take out the leaders. As I mentioned, those guys used drones to hit Kremlin one time, remember? So why didn't they do this? Well, maybe now this is a blanche card to do it. We'll find out. Will the Russians use nuclear weapons? That's for the next topic, which has to do with the attack, the successful attack of whomever planned the attacks on the 5 Russian airfields, destroying not 41 bombers, but about 10, and destroying and damaging about 10 more. That's the result, which is, by all means, a successful operation. It doesn't matter if it were 100 or there were 5. The fact that these guys were able to penetrate and damage and destroy some planes, it's a successful operation. All right, let's move on. So remember, the terror will continue. This guy. CNN. Trump says Putin told him in phone call he will respond to Ukraine's weekend drone attacks. Those are the ones that damaged the planes. Putin warns Trump he will respond to Ukraine's Operation Spider's Web. Kremlin confirms Putin told Trump that Russia will retaliate to Ukraine's attack on airfields. Kremlin explains how and when Moscow will respond to Ukrainian attacks on military airfields. So this is a war. This is not the same thing as with, the terrorist attack on those bridges. So let's see what Peskov has to say. The Kremlin has stated that Russia will respond to Ukraine's attacks on its strategic airfields when and how the Russian military deems necessary. Dmitry Peskov confirmed that Vladimir Putin said during a telephone conversation with US President Donald Trump the day before that Moscow would respond to the attack. So, what do you think, my friends? How would be the attack? Well, I have one ally here who says this. Ally of Putin, obviously, from the Newsweek. Putin ally says Ukraine operation grounds for nuclear attack, end quote. And we have here somewhere at the bottom this guy right here. So let me just go and find out. All right, Sunday's coordinated attacks are, and I'm quoting, grounds for a nuclear attack. Vladimir Solovyov, one of Russia's most well-known propagandists and state commentators, said in remarks reported by Ukrainian media. The TV presenter has repeatedly pushed nuclear weapons into Russian discourse around the more than 3 years of war in Ukraine, and has floated the idea of a nuclear strike on NATO countries. So what do you think, my friends? Well, I personally think that these attacks could fall under the use of nuclear weapons by Russia, but I'm not in charge and I don't know I don't have all the cards, as Trump says. But that's their decision. I think Russia does not want to use nuclear weapons. That's my assessment. It doesn't want to use nuclear weapons in order to take America's criminal role in the only country dropping atomic bombs. You don't really hear, you don't have this commentated clear enough. I'm talking about the war crime of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's like, yeah, the Americans dropped 2 atomic bombs and that's it. Now imagine if, let's say, Iran has, or North Korea uses, or Russia, God forbid, uses nuclear weapons in this context, after it designated the guys over there terrorists, after it says those guys attacked, and this is our reason why we do. Can you imagine how the textbooks for our children in the Western world will describe this? And forever and ever and ever, their media operatives would describe it as war crime in Hiroshima, Nagasaki. Even if the Russians use it on a, let's say, military target, clear military target, just the use, then you will never hear again about the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. You will always have this as the biggest, that's why I think the Russians will not allow themselves to use this. They're not at that point. Yes, it was a successful operation, but no nuclear weapons because of that. And the Russians are not desperate yet. I think it's a matter of, the conscience. They don't want to leave these guys open to chew this over and over and over. I guarantee you, all our children will be regimented and propagandized with like we have others, and we forget others. We have some pure evil guys that are promoted every day and every year by Hollywood, and that's it. You have to forget and forgive other equally big criminals. But hey, these are the ones we are required to focus on because someone else dictates that. So we have to know about that guy, and that guy. We can't look at Moses. No. Don't look at Moses whatsoever. And many other mass murderers. If you don't think that guy was a mass murderer and a genocidal guy, I want you to read your or whomever's Old Testament at the orders of the great general that loves us. Read it. And if you don't find that, go and buy my books. Go on Amazon and you're going to find my books, God's Nature, Volume 1 and Volume 2. And you're going to find out exactly the orders if it's too hard to open the Old Testament. All right, so got done with science fiction here. So, do you think they will use nuclear weapons? I don't think so, but isn't that strange? They never hit Kiev. Kiev in a way that they will hit the presidential or the Rada or these guys, maybe not the Rada, because Rada, is different. It's not part of the leading government, like the guys in charge. Government is president with these baboons, with his administration. And let me show you what the Americans do. Maybe they will. Right there, Russia Today. U.S. issues security alert for Kiev. It's like these guys heard me. No, this is the normal how should I put, a consequence, normal consequence, a reaction to an action. That's the way it is, unless you're a pussy. So if I slap you and you don't retaliate, well, good for you, good for me. Maybe you have some ideologies, but nevertheless, if you smack me, you're gonna have a reaction, a negative reaction. So that's the normal way to do it. The abnormal, you can, turn the other cheek and forgive me. All right? All right. President Vladimir Putin informed his U.S. counterpart that Moscow will respond to Ukrainian attacks on Russian strategic air bases. The U.S. Embassy in Kiev has advised Americans to heed air raid sirens and shelter appropriately, warning of a continued risk of significant air attacks in a new security alert issued on Wednesday. Russian President Vladimir Putin did say, and very strongly, that he will have to respond to recent Ukrainian attacks on airfield hosting Russian strategic bombers, the U.S. President Donald Trump wrote on Truth Social. Ready, my friends? Ready for that? What do you think they will do? They already bombarded, I think, in Kursk, a governmental building. But I don't know if it's going to be Kiev. Because think about it. If the Russians eliminate the terrorists, as they call them now, the media in the West will call the Russians terrorists. They will start the narrative from the elimination of what the Russians call as. Not before. All right? So if you just turn the corner and you see me smacking someone real bad, you will call me the aggressor. You will call me, oh my God, that's rather assault. Emil should be okay. But if you go 20 seconds before that, that guy might have my family. And I just apprehended him and I give him a little bit of retribution. But these guys will start the story, just Emil, That's not making love. That's punching in the eye socket, okay? So that's what it is. And that's why I don't know if the Russians will do that. But if they do that, what's going to happen? Destroy one branch and there's going to be a second echelon. Because the guys in charge of Ukraine are allowed to stay in power as long as they do what the Brits tell them to do. That's the bottom line. And the Brits do what the guys in charge of them, the interests, tell them to do. You got it? And the interests are banking system. And I'm not saying that banking system is going to be a Rothschild calling this guy, hey, put that guy over there. No, it's not like that. The interest used money, open doors, promote with their media and so on, promotes their baboons who would do their job when they get like Starmer in office. Okay, that's how they do it. They operate. And Starmer knows who paid for all this and who he needs to kiss in the ass. So, if this echelon goes, it's going to be popped other by MI6, for instance. So I think Putin would let the West sort these things out, which is Trump. He thinks that Trump will smack the Brits and will do, clear the house in Kiev. If Trump is allowed to even do what he says he will do, which I don't know if he's not part of the whole thing, and he cannot do anything. The guys with the guns are protecting him, like Zelensky is protected by the bodyguards. His bodyguards? Remember, these guys can have you disappear or have an accident, fall off the stairs and break your neck, like Epstein, just like that. And the media will tell us exactly what happened, like an Epstein case. So, one, Russia designate these guys not only as illegitimate but terrorists. Second, Russia will retaliate. Third, these guys are calling for shelter, blah, 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 security alert for Kiev. Thank you very much for being with me again today. Stay strong, stay smart, look for the truth, and be just.